prior to January 6th?
Yes, thank you for that question. The way that I read locked and loaded to be interpreted by the tweets that I saw coming on Twitter prior to January 6th was that individuals were loaded, were armed, and that they were ready to commit violence.
Are you concerned that the use of this language will continue to incite and legitimize political violence leading to the next election?
Absolutely. We are sitting exactly 1 month in which the exact same playbook was played in Brazil, and we saw almost deja vu happening again. As I said in my opening statement, unless we do something, this will continue to happen again.
Thank you, Ms. Navaroli. Mr. Roth, you are no stranger to conspiracies and their real-world consequences. If you don't mind, can you please describe for the committee how the release of the so-called Twitter files has affected your personal safety?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. The Twitter files, I would note first and foremost, didn't just affect me, but affected much more junior employees at Twitter. Employees as far away as Manila in the Philippines were doxxed, had their families threatened, and experienced harm equal to or greater than what I've experienced. But concurrent with the Twitter files, Elon Musk also made the decision to share a defamatory allegation that I support or condone pedophilia. And this lie led directly to a wave of homophobic and anti-Semitic threats and harassment against me, of which Twitter has removed vanishingly little. And following the Daily Mail's decision to publish where I live, ultimately I had to leave my home and sell it. Those are the consequences for this type of online harassment and speech.
Well, I must say, those are very real consequences. By legitimizing unsubstantiated conspiracy theories about the deep state, big tech, and government censorship for political gain, committee Republicans are holding a match to a powder keg. We all saw the consequences of this kind of rhetoric on January 6th, and we continue to see it play out as political violence and hate crimes grip communities around the country. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Lady yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Mace for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Twitter files were not just about Hunter Biden's laptop. Twitter files make it apparent Twitter worked overtime to suppress accurate COVID information. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is a professor of medicine at Stanford who once tweeted an article he wrote about natural immunity. Thanks to Elon Musk's release of the Twitter files, we learned some of his tweets were tagged with the label of Trends Blacklist. Apparently, the views of a Stanford doctor are disinformation to you people. I, along with many Americans, have long-term effects from COVID. Not only was I a long hauler, but I have effects from the vaccine. It wasn't the first shot, but it was the second shot that I now developed asthma that has never gone away since I had the second shot. I have tremors in my left hand, and I have the occasional heart pain that no doctor can explain, and I've had a battery of tests. I find it extremely alarming Twitter's unfettered censorship spread into medical fields and affected millions of Americans by suppressing expert opinions from doctors and censoring those who disagree with the CDC. I have great regrets about getting the shot because of the health issues that I now have that I don't think are ever going to go away. And I know that I'm not the only American who has those kinds of concerns. Another example of what Twitter has done to censor folks is from Dr. Martin Koldorf, a Harvard-educated epidemiologist who once tweeted, COVID vaccines are important for high-risk people and their caretakers. Those with prior natural infection do not need it, nor children. The Twitter files reveal this tweet was deemed false information because it ran contrary to the CDC. So my first question this morning of Ms. Gaddy, may I ask of you, where did you go to medical school?
I did not go to medical school.
I'm sorry?
I did not go to medical school.
That's what I thought. Why do you think you or anyone else at Twitter had the medical expertise to censor a doctor's expert opinion?
Our policies regarding COVID were designed to protect individuals. We were seeing
You guys censored Harvard-educated doctors, Stanford-educated doctors, doctors that are educated in the best places in the world, and you silenced those voices. My next question is, did the U.S. government, oh, excuse me, I have another chart I want to show you, Ms. Gaddy. I have another tweet by someone with a following of a full 18,000 followers. This person put a chart from the CDC on Twitter. It's the CDC's own data, so it's accurate by your standards. And you all labeled this as misleading. You're not a doctor, right, Ms. Gaddy?
No, I'm not.
Okay. What makes you think you or anyone else at Twitter have the medical expertise to censor actual, accurate CDC data?
I'm not familiar with these particular situations.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not. But this is what Twitter did. They labeled this as inaccurate. It is the government's own data. It's ridiculous that we're even having to have this conversation today. It's not just about the laptop. This is about medical advice that expert doctors were trying to give Americans because social media companies like Twitter were silencing their voices. I have another question, my last one for you, Ms. Gaddy. Did the U.S. government ever contact you or anyone at Twitter to pressure Twitter to moderate or censor certain tweets? Yes or no?
We have a program.
Did the U.S. government ever contact you or anyone at Twitter to censor or moderate certain tweets? Yes or no?
We receive legal demands to remove content from the platform from the U.S. government and governments all around the world. Those are published on a third-party website, and anyone can review
Thank
them.
God for Matt Taibbi. Thank God for Elon Musk for allowing to show us in the world that Twitter was basically a subsidiary of the FBI, censoring real medical voices with real expertise that put real Americans' lives in danger because they didn't have that information. I also want to thank one of my colleagues, Ro Khanna, because as it turns out, censorship isn't just an important issue to conservatives. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, like Ro, found this censorship very concerning, and even wrote to you and to folks at Twitter that he was concerned about the First Amendment being censored. So I want to thank him for speaking up and speaking out about this issue, because this should not be a partisan issue. This should be an issue that's an American issue. Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter into the record, I ask unanimous consent, to enter into the record a Wall Street Journal article from December 9th, 2022 by Justin Hart entitled, "The Twitter Blacklisting of Jay Bhattacharya." Enter the record, please, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Lynch for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to go over the chronology here, Mr. Roth. Back in 2016, Russia and Vladimir Putin engaged in what bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee investigators called a, and I quote, aggressive, multifaceted effort to influence the outcome of that year's presidential election. The campaign included hacking of the systems of a major political party and leaking illegally obtained information, scanning U.S. election systems for vulnerabilities, and exploiting the weaknesses of social media platforms to spread disinformation to the American people. Again, in a 2017 declassified report, the U.S. intelligence community assessed that Russia's 2016 election operations signaled a, quote, new normal in Russian influence efforts, and that the Kremlin would, quote, apply lessons learned going forward against the U.S. and its allies. Mr. Roth, in a December interview with journalist Kara Swisher, you state that this declassified assessment was, quote, and I'm quoting you, a watershed moment in the history of content moderation and the Internet, close quote. You also stated in that interview that Twitter discussed potential threats to the integrity of the 2020 elections, and it was, quote, and I'm quoting you again, obvious to think about the most influential thing that impacted the 2016 election, which was the hack and leak campaign organized by the Russian government, and that, quote, we would have been stupid not to think about that risk. Mr. Roth, why would Twitter have been stupid to ignore that risk?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I think Twitter and the entire social media industry were frankly caught with their pants down in 2016 and missed an opportunity to do the critical work of protecting election security. This isn't my judgment. This is the judgment of academics and researchers who have spent years studying Russian active measures. And most of their conclusions suggest that the #1 most influential part of the Russian active measures campaign in 2016 was the hack and leak targeting John Podesta. It would have been foolish not to consider the possibility that they would run that play again.
Right. And so let me ask, was that top of mind for Twitter? You're trying to measure the credibility of incoming intelligence. Was that top of mind in regard to your decision, the company's decision to temporarily limit the distribution of the October 14th New York Post story that was delivered by Mayor Giuliani?
Yes, that was one of the animating concerns for us. For nearly 2 years, we had engaged in scenario planning exercises for potential risks tied to the elections, and one of them appeared to be happening that day. Now, again, I think the facts were complicated, and I